My guest today is Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein. He is the former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. He is currently a professor of the practice at University of Pennsylvania at their School of Law. And I'm going to ask him what he thinks the future of human rights might look like in a post-COVID world.
It assumes that there's a future for the human beings post-COVID world, given the accumulation of crises and the stress that we see on the international system from a number of different angles, whether it be geopolitical, climate change, this pandemic, and potentially more pandemics to come, the brittleness of societies, the thin veneer that is civilized behavior in many societies. One can very well ask the question if we're approaching an existential moment, because the leadership is so mediocre, global leadership, mediocre, beyond any shadow of a doubt, not just in government, but also international organizations. The fact that it's spread all over the world speaks volumes for our incompetence. So where do we come out of this? Well, if we can survive the geopolitics of it, and we don't see a confrontation, military confrontation between China and the US, and somehow Europe doesn't spiral off into extremism, and the rest of the world comes to its senses that it's important that frontline hospital workers, that people who provide us with services are properly respected and properly remunerated and looked after and listened to.
You know, that is a lot of ifs. And what will it take for the world to come to its senses?
Two things have to happen. One, there has to be, I think, fairly decisive outcome in the US elections. The continuation of President Trump is not salutary where human rights are concerned. And China also has to find a way of changing its approach to the rights questions. What's happening in Xinjiang is appalling, maybe even more appalling now than ever before concerning the Uyghur population. But also we see now in Hong Kong this rather extraordinary move and potentially a sort of a sequential another step after that. So these are frightening times and hopeful times, and the law of contradiction doesn't really work very well these days. We see journalists who dare accuse the government in question of incompetence in handling the coronavirus, sent to or put in detention, arrested. We see the opposition silence any attempts at demonstrations blocked. And the amazing thing, in the shadow of this most dreadful killing that took place not long ago of George Floyd, and others tragically and disgracefully have been killed since him as well, is that we've seen this amazing global reaction, solidarity with the African American community here, but the Afro descendants throughout the world also, I think, who have to deal with entrenched and structural racism of the most appalling kind. But the solidarity, the people who've come out into the streets to say enough of this, enough racism, we have to put an end to it. And then the corollaries, enough anti-Semitism, enough anti-Hispanic sentiment, enough Islamophobia, enough, and I was asked a question once, a very pertinent question by a young lady, probably around 14 years old, and she said, "Why do we discriminate? Why do you discriminate? Your generation. For them, it's less obvious. Why do our generation then insist upon it? Why can't we have pluralistic societies? Why can't we reshape what identity means? Why does this ethno-nationalism have to keep rearing its head, and we can't seem to slay it and put it away?" I mean, it's a frightening indictment of how stupid we are and how cowardly we are.
What would you say to that girl? Why have we not done better?
There's a tendency within our community, I talk about ourselves, to be too self-righteous sometimes. And we have to be careful, we have to be humble about it. There's this little poem I read recently by Hafiz, and it's called 10,000 Idiots. And he basically says, it is always a danger to aspirants on the path when they begin to believe and act as if the 10,000 idiots who so long ruled and lived inside have all packed their bags and skipped town or died. The warning is that none of us have the purity of soul to tell everyone what they should do. We have to constantly check our worst impulses within ourselves and fight the battle for the good of everyone, not the good of just a small slice of humanity.